I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding as if someone had violently shaken me out of sleep. The knocking on the door came rapidly, urgently, as though someone out there was desperate and had no time left to wait. I reached over and glanced at the bedside clock. The hour hand pointed exactly to 2 a.m. My God, who would be knocking at this hour? I'm David Coleman, 38 years old, an operations manager at the port in San Diego, California. I'm used to night shifts and emergency situations, but the feeling at that moment was completely different. San Diego at midnight is usually eerily quiet, with only the sound of ocean waves echoing faintly from afar, steady and reassuring. But this knocking was not like that. It was frantic, hurried, carrying a clear sense of unease that sent a chill down my spine, as if it wasn't just a call but a warning emerging from the darkness. I sat up, my mind still foggy after a long shift at the port. As an operations manager, I'm accustomed to night work, but being at home is different. My house is in a peaceful neighborhood, not the kind of place where burglaries or trouble often happen. Rachel, my wife, was still sleeping soundly beside me, her breathing steady. I didn't want to wake her right away, but the knocking came again, this time louder, almost pleading. A wave of foreboding washed over me. Could it be a neighbor in trouble? I reached for the jacket hanging at the head of the bed, threw it on quickly, and quietly slipped out of the bedroom. Our house is a small beachside bungalow with a hallway leading straight to the front door. With every step I took, the wooden floor creaked under my feet, sounding like whispered warnings. I stopped in front of the door, pressed my ear against the wood, and tried to listen. There were no voices, just labored breathing from outside mixed with the night wind. My heart beat faster. "Who's out there?" I whispered through the crack in the door, trying to keep my voice calm, though it was actually trembling. There was no answer. Instead, the knocking came again. Weaker this time, as if the person outside was running out of strength. I gripped the doorknob tightly and took a deep breath. All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind, maybe a drunk who had lost his way, or a child in distress. But my instinct told me it was something worse. I opened the door just a crack, enough to peer through the gap, and then I froze. Standing before me was Brooke, my own sister. She stood huddled under the dim porch light, her face pale as paper, hair disheveled, clothes rumpled as if she had just fled from hell. On her arms and neck, deep bruises were clearly visible, some still oozing fresh blood. "Oh God, Brooke." Without thinking further, I flung the door wide open and pulled her inside. "What happened to you?" My voice broke, but I tried to hold it together, afraid of panicking her more. She was shaking uncontrollably, her whole body ice cold as if she had been submerged in seawater. I held her tightly, feeling her ragged breathing on my shoulder. The smell of blood mixed with tears twisted my heart. Rachel woke up from the noise and rushed out of the bedroom with a worried look on her face. She didn't ask many questions. My wife is always like that, quick and calm in emergencies. "David, what's going on?" she whispered, then saw Brooke. Without another word, Rachel hurried to the kitchen, grabbing a thick blanket and a cup of warm water. I turned the heater up to the highest setting, hoping to chase away the cold that enveloped my sister. We helped Brooke sit on the sofa and wrapped the blanket around her. She curled up into a ball, eyes tightly shut, but I could see tears still streaming down her cheeks. I stood silently watching her, my heart aching. Brooke, my little sister, now looked like an injured baby bird. The bruises on her neck, they looked like fingerprints from someone squeezing tightly. On her arms, several long scratches, red and raw. I wanted to ask immediately to know who had done this to her, but I held back. A flood of questions surged in my mind. How did she get here from La Jolla? What happened with Nolan? But I knew Brooke was still in shock. Her eyes were wide open, but her gaze was vacant, as if she were somewhere far away. After a while, when Brooke's breathing had steadied a bit thanks to the warmth from the heater and the cup of water Rachel gave her, I slowly sat down beside her. My eyes looked at her with both worry and remorse. "Brooke, are you okay? Tell me, what happened?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm and gentle as possible, like soothing a child. I didn't want to scare her further. Rachel sat on the other side, gently stroking her back in silent comfort. And then, like a dam breaking, Brooke suddenly burst into sobs. The crying echoed, all the pent-up pain exploding out. She clung tightly to me, her shoulders shaking. "David, I can't take it anymore." Her voice broke, mixed with sobs. I held her even tighter, overwhelmed by helplessness. "Tell me, Brooke, what on earth happened?" Brooke wiped her tears, trying to regain composure. She began to speak, her voice trembling but filled with pain. "It's Nolan, David. My marriage. It was never as stable as you thought. Nolan Price, her husband, a wealthy man in La Jolla with a flashy exterior, luxury cars, beautiful house. I once thought she was lucky to marry him, but now, behind that facade is terrible coldness and control. He controls everything. Where I go, who I meet, even what I wear has to be according to his wishes." I listened, my heart tightening. Brooke continued, her voice growing softer as if afraid someone might hear. "I discovered he was cheating a few months ago. At first, I tried to endure it, thinking it might just be a passing fling. I desperately advised him, begged him to think of me, of our child. But he became more and more blatant. He brought that woman home right in front of me, treating me like I didn't exist. Her words made my blood boil. I imagined the scene. Brooke, my sister, who used to be the cheerful little girl running around the house, now reduced to an outsider in her own home. Every time I questioned or resisted, he responded with violence. At first it was verbal. He cursed and humiliated me. Then gradually he started physically abusing me. These bruises, she pointed to her neck, her voice choking. The worst was tonight. He brazenly brought his mistress home, laughing and talking as if I were invisible. I objected, begged him to stop, but he flew into a rage and beat me mercilessly. I was stunned. The image of Brooke being beaten, fleeing into the night, not knowing where to go except to me, her only brother. I ran away from the house, David. I ran on foot in the middle of the night. I couldn't call a taxi because I left in such a hurry that I had no money. I only knew to come here. To you. You're the one I trust the most." Hearing her story, I felt both heartbreak and rage. Tears rolled down my face without me realizing. Brooke's married life had never been as peaceful as I had assumed. I thought she was happy with that rich husband living a luxurious life in La Jolla. But behind it all was hell. And the most bitter part was that I had been too busy with my port job with endless long shifts to notice the loneliness and danger she had been enduring alone for so long. I held her tighter and whispered, "You're safe now, Brooke. I'm here. I won't let him hurt you again." But inside, fury boiled. "Nolan Price, you will pay for what you've done." That night we sat together under the flickering light of the heater, and I knew this story was only just beginning. The firelight danced on the walls, casting long, eerie shadows that resembled lurking monsters. I looked at Brooke, my sister, who had calmed down a little after her sobbing outburst. The bruises on her skin were still there, a constant reminder of the pain she had endured. Rachel quietly brewed more hot tea, gently placing the cup beside Brooke before sitting down on the floor, her hand tenderly stroking my sister's leg with the caring touch of a mother. The room still felt heavy, but at least in this moment, Brooke was in a safe place. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the chaotic thoughts swirling in my mind. One thing I knew for certain: I couldn't let this slide as if nothing had happened, and I absolutely could not allow Nolan to continue tormenting my sister even once more. I spoke softly, scooting closer to her, placing my hand on her shoulder to offer some warmth. "You need to end this. This marriage. It's far too toxic. I'll help you gather evidence, these injuries, the previous ones, and take him to court. He has to be held accountable for what he's done." My words carried determination, but also deep concern. I imagined Nolan standing in the defendant's dock, his arrogant expression crumbling. That was the justice my sister deserved. But Brooke's reaction stunned me. The moment she heard the words divorce and lawsuit, she froze in shock, her body stiffening as if turned to ice. She shook her head repeatedly, an instinctive reflex, her eyes filled with terror. a fear even more horrifying than the purple bruises on her skin. "No, David, we can't do that," she whispered, her voice trembling, her hands clutching mine tightly as if letting go would cause everything to collapse. Her eyes widened, tears streaming down again, but this time not from physical pain, but from a deep, inner horror. I tried to hold her, to comfort her. "You can't keep living like this. He'll end up killing you." But she gently pushed me away, shaking her head even more violently. "You don't understand. Please don't make a big deal out of this, I beg you. If this goes even one step further, the consequences will be beyond my control." Her voice broke as if she were pleading for her very life. My heart tightened. Brooke, my once strong, carefree, laughing sister, now looked like a hunted animal, always ready to flee. She began to speak, her voice halting as if it took immense effort to get the words out. "Every time he hurt me, he accompanied it with cold threats. He said if I ever dared to divorce him or report him, he would make sure I lost custody of our child. He'd do anything to ensure I never saw my child again." I went numb. A little child, probably still very young, trapped in the middle of this hell. He said he has his own lawyers, money to hire private investigators to prove I'm an unfit mother. I'm so scared, David. My child is everything to me. I listened, the anger inside me now mixed with profound sorrow. But Brooke wasn't finished. She continued, her voice trembling like an autumn leaf in the wind. "Nolan has repeatedly emphasized the power and wealth of the Price family. He said they're capable of twisting any story to their advantage. His family, they have connections to judges, to the police, to all sorts of people. They can turn white into black." She paused, swallowing hard, her gaze distant as she stared into the flames. I trembled just thinking about it. My in-laws would spread rumors to destroy my reputation, paint me as a gold digger, mentally unstable. They'd circulate fabricated stories so that society itself would judge. Who is more believable? A wealthy, powerful family like the Prices, or a vulnerable woman like me? Her words cut into my heart like a knife. I writhed in pain, realizing that my sister wasn't just suffering physical abuse, the visible beatings, but had also been controlled through psychological terror for a long time. It was an invisible cage built from threats, money, and power. Brooke wasn't fleeing the punches, she was fleeing the fear that if she stepped out, everything would become even worse. I live with that fear every day. Every morning when I wake up, I think of my child and I choose silence. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, pacing back and forth in the room, trying to suppress my rage. "Brooke, listen to me. Staying silent only encourages him to go further. Today it's beatings. Tomorrow it could be worse. You have to fight. I'll be right here with you. We'll find a way." I sat back down, my voice persuasive, breaking it down step by step. "We have evidence. Your injuries, maybe hospital records. The law will protect you. Don't let him win through fear." But Brooke still shook her head, her eyes filled with despair, as if she had grown accustomed to living in that invisible cage. "You don't know everything. It breaks my heart to tell you this." She paused, took a deep breath, then revealed something that sent a chill down my spine. Before he married me, Nolan physically abused an ex-girlfriend. The case nearly went to court. She reported him, but then everything went silent. I held my breath, waiting for her to continue. His parents used money and their powerful connections to cover it up. They hired top lawyers, bribed witnesses, and the truth vanished as if it had never existed. She withdrew the complaint and disappeared from the city. Now thinking back, I'm terrified I'll end up the same way. I just want to stay here tonight. Once things calm down, I'll go back. I don't have the courage to consider any other path. Hearing that, I felt a numbness of helplessness wash over me. I slumped back into the chair, hands clutching my head, letting the chaotic thoughts crash around in my mind. I realized this wasn't just a simple case of a broken marriage. This was a cycle of violence, nurtured and shielded by money and power, a cycle that had imprisoned my sister for far too long without offering her any escape. Nolan wasn't just a lone abuser. Behind him stood an entire system ready to protect him at all costs. The Price family, with their mansion in La Jolla, their large company, and their dense web of connections, loomed in my mind like a cold, towering fortress, formidable and seemingly impenetrable. That night dragged on slowly like a prolonged nightmare. I lay awake in bed next to Rachel, who was sleeping soundly, but my mind refused to stop churning. The image of Brooke covered in bruises, her trembling voice as she spoke of her fear of losing her child, and Nolan's cold threats. They all replayed over and over. I asked myself why I hadn't noticed sooner. During family gatherings, whenever I saw her, she always forced a smile and avoided eye contact when I asked about her marriage. I thought it was just exhaustion from raising a child and managing the household. Now it was clear. She had been living in hell, and I, her brother, had been blind for far too long. The next morning I woke up in an unusually quiet house. Early sunlight filtered through the curtains, shining on the polished wooden floor, but the heavy atmosphere lingered. The fireplace had gone out long ago, the ashes lying still like a reminder of the horrific night. The blanket on the sofa was neatly folded into a perfect square, as if no one had ever lain there. Brooke had left at some point without a word. My heart tightened. Had she gone without saying anything? I rushed to the living room, hoping to find her in the kitchen making coffee, but there was nothing. Only an eerie silence enveloped everything. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number with trembling hands. It rang a few times before Brooke's voice came through on the other end, trying to sound calm. Her tone was light, as if discussing the weather, but I could clearly hear the strain. "I'm fine now, David. Don't worry anymore, okay? Last night was just a fleeting nightmare." I froze. She was fine? How could she be fine when she had shown up here covered in injuries? Her words sounded more like self-reassurance than truth, as if she were trying to convince herself. "Brooke, where are you right now? Let me come pick you up and bring you back here to stay for a while." I pleaded, my voice urgent. But she let out a soft laugh, a forced, awkward one. "I'm home now, David. My child is waiting. Don't worry, I'm really okay." Then she hung up, leaving me with the endless beep of the disconnected line. I set the phone down, my heart heavy as if a boulder were pressing on my chest. That okay only made me more uneasy. What was she hiding? Was Nolan there, forcing her to say that? I imagined her returning home, facing him, and rage surged through me again. No, I couldn't just sit still. I sat silently at the dining table for a long time, the coffee in front of me growing cold, lost in thought and hesitation. Glancing at the clock, it was only 7 a.m. Rachel was still asleep, but I couldn't wait any longer. I realized I couldn't ignore the fact that Brooke was trapped in a cycle of violence. I alone wasn't enough. If I wanted to protect her, I needed allies. And the first people I thought of were our parents. I quickly threw on a jacket, grabbed my car keys, and hit the road. My parents' house was in Santee, San Diego, about a 20-minute drive if traffic was light. Early in the morning, the streets were mostly empty, with only a few delivery trucks here and there. I sped along the highway, the sea breeze blowing in through the window, but it did nothing to dispel the urgent mix of faint hope and anxiety in my chest. My parents, Frank and Janet Coleman, had always been the rock for me and my siblings since we were kids. My father worked as a mechanic in a repair shop. My mother was a retired elementary school teacher. They weren't wealthy, but their love was boundless. They would surely be furious when they heard, and they would stand by Brooke. I pictured my father clenching his fists, my mother in tears, and then the three of us planning together to save her. That hope made my heart beat faster, but deep down a nagging unease lingered. Were they now older and accustomed to a peaceful life, willing to confront this? I arrived as the sun climbed a little higher. My parents' modest house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with the flower garden my mother tended and the garage where my father tinkered with cars. I parked in front, took a deep breath, and knocked. My father opened the door, his face surprised. "Why are you here so early? Is something wrong, son?" With his hair now completely white from the years but his build still sturdy from a lifetime of manual labor, My father carried the resilience of hard work. My mother, Janet, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes wide. "Oh, my boy, why do you look so tense? Come in, I'll make coffee." They were startled to see me appear so early, my face strained and far from my usual calm demeanor. I typically visited on weekends with a smile and a few small gifts. We sat around the kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air, but the mood quickly grew heavy as I began to speak. Without beating around the bush, I solemnly recounted everything from the night before. Brooke knocking at 2 a.m., covered in bruises, shivering in the cold. I told them about Nolan, the wealthy but cruel husband, the beatings, the blatant infidelity, and the threats of taking away custody of her child. I described her psychological terror, the cycle of violence shielded by money. My parents listened in silence, their eyes filled with sadness mixed with worry and helplessness, as if they too were facing a bitter truth. My mother wiped away tears, her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. My father bowed his head, tightly gripping my mother's hand. I paused, took a breath, and got to the point. "Mom, Dad, I need your help. I want to sue Nolan, or at the very least for you to convince Brooke to divorce him and escape this abusive marriage. We can't let her suffer any longer." My words carried my last remaining hope, but their reaction left me stunned. My parents shifted to panic, eyes wide, shaking their heads vigorously. "We can't do that, David," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do it, son. The Price family, they're too powerful. Their money could crush us." My father nodded, his voice low. "She's right. Just endure it. They're a force we can't touch. We've seen many cases, ordinary families who dared to sue the rich and then faced retaliation. Everything falls apart, from finances to reputation." To persuade me to drop the idea, they recounted stories they had witnessed. A friend of my father's who sued a wealthy boss for fraud, only to be slandered, lose his job, and end up destitute. A neighbor who reported her son-in-law for abuse, but the in-laws used money to bribe lawyers and portrayed her as insane in court. "We don't want our family to be the next one, David," my mother choked out. "Brooke just needs to endure a little longer, and it will pass. As long as the family stays intact, no one gets dragged into danger." I was dumbfounded, frozen. Their words cut into my heart like a knife. My parents, the ones who had taught me about justice, about protecting family, were now advising endurance. I looked at my father, remembering childhood days when he taught me to fight back against bullies at school. "Don't be afraid, son. Stand up for yourself. If you show weakness, they'll just bully you again." And now, they had lived too long in submission and fear, to the point of sacrificing their daughter's happiness and safety for a false sense of peace. What kind of peace was it when Brooke was slowly dying inside? I tried to persuade them, my voice shaking with restrained emotion. "But you can't just ignore it when she's being tormented like this. Silence isn't safety, it's complicity. If this continues, she could lose her life." My father shook his head, his eyes heavy. "You're still young. You don't understand life fully yet. Money and power rule everything. We're just ordinary people. We can't fight them." My mother broke into sobs, her voice breaking. "I love Brooke so much, but I'm scared. I'm scared of losing everything." The conversation dragged on in a suffocating tension, like a string pulled to its breaking point. When no words could sway them, I stood up and left, burdened with profound disappointment. The car sped away into the gray morning, my mind in turmoil. I realized a painful truth. For now, Brooke had to face her fears alone, and as for me, I had stepped into this fight on my own with no way to turn back. The days that followed passed like a prolonged nightmare, slow, relentless, and haunting. I tried to return to my normal routine, throwing myself into work at the San Diego port. The long, grueling shifts filled with the blaring of ship horns, the screeching of cranes lifting and lowering containers, and the distant roar of waves crashing. All of it had once been my source of peace. But now, it was merely background noise to the simmering anxiety in my heart. Every morning I woke up hoping for a message from Brooke saying she was okay, that everything had passed. But my phone stayed silent except for a few brief texts. "I'm feeling better now, David." Better? How could she be better when I knew she was living beside a monster? My worry for Brooke was like an open wound that refused to heal, slowly bleeding and keeping me constantly on edge. I lost my appetite and couldn't sleep properly. Rachel noticed. She held me every night and whispered, "You need to rest, David. We'll find a way." But how could I rest when the image of my sister covered in bruises kept flashing before my eyes? I remembered our childhood days when Brooke and I ran around on the beach while our parents laughed nearby. Back then, the world was simple. If there was a problem, you ran home and Mom and Dad would fix it. But now, our parents had chosen silence, chosen a false peace. I called Brooke a few times. Her voice was always strained, like she was performing in a play. "Nolan apologized to me, David. Everything's okay now." I knew she was lying, to protect me or to protect herself. The tension built up like a ticking time bomb, and I was just waiting for it to explode. At work, I kept glancing at the clock and checking my phone, terrified I'd miss a call from her. Colleagues asked, "Why do you look so out of it, David?" I forced a smile. "It's nothing, just overthinking stuff." But inside, the unease grew larger, like a shadow spreading. Then one afternoon, as the sun began to set and painted the San Diego sky red, everything shattered. I was packing up at the office, briefcase under my arm, car keys jingling in my hand, ready to leave. My phone suddenly vibrated. The ringtone echoed in the quiet room and startled me. Brooke's name flashed on the screen. My heart pounded. A bad feeling flooded me. Why was she calling at this hour? She usually only texted. I answered, my voice trembling. "What's wrong, Brooke? Why are you calling?" Her voice on the other end was shaking, urgent, as if fleeing from something terrifying. "David, please save me. I can't take it anymore." Her words broke off, mixed with shouting and the sound of things crashing. Then abruptly the call cut off completely. Only the endless beep remained. I froze. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the desk with a sharp noise. Panic overwhelmed me. My heart felt like it stopped. What was happening? Was Nolan beating her, or worse? The memory of that night rushed back, her huddled at my door. I couldn't lose her. I bolted out of the office without another thought. Colleagues called after me. "David, where are you going in such a hurry?" But I didn't care. My feet flew down the stairs, heart racing wildly. In the parking lot, I jumped into the car. The engine roared as I turned the key. The car shot out onto the road, tires screeching on the asphalt. The drive from the port to La Jolla usually took 30 minutes, but today I drove like a maniac. Running red lights, honking furiously. Wind whipped through the open window, but I felt nothing except fear. "Hold on, Brooke. I'm coming," I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every second felt like an eternity. If I was even a little late, what would happen to her? Call the police? No, too slow. I had to get there now. The car sped into the upscale La Jolla neighborhood with its lavish mansions and lush greenery, but everything blurred into the background. I screeched to a halt in front of Brooke's, Nolan's house, tires smoking. The front door was ajar. Shouts echoed from inside. I charged straight in without knocking, slamming the door open so hard the hinges groaned. The scene before me made my blood boil. Nolan stood there, face flushed red, hurling the vilest insults at Brooke. His eyes were full of contempt, as if looking at an animal rather than his wife. Brooke lay on the floor, face twisted in pain, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, arms cradling her head. Beside her was her shattered phone, glass fragments scattered everywhere. Time seemed to freeze. Rage blinded me. "You bastard, what have you done to my sister?" I roared, charging at him like a wild beast. I shoved Nolan hard. He staggered and crashed into the wall with a thud. I immediately pulled Brooke into my arms, shielding her with my body as the initial fear transformed into uncontrollable fury. She sobbed, trembling in my embrace, her breathing ragged. I stroked her hair, my voice breaking. I'm here now. You're safe. But my eyes stayed locked on Nolan, ready to attack if he moved. The anger inside me reached its peak. I sprang to my feet, pointing straight at his face, growling each word with all my remaining strength. You're an animal. What makes you think you have the right to lay a hand on my sister? Are you even a man? My sister is a human being, not an object for you to vent your rage on. I could feel the boundary inside me shaking violently. If he dared touch Brooke one more time, all restraint would collapse. I knew I could hit him, maybe do something far worse. My fists clenched so tightly they shook, every muscle taut like a string about to snap. Nolan staggered to his feet, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth, the result of my shove, then let out a sneer. An arrogant, contemptuous smile, as if this were all just entertainment. No apology, no fear. He growled, "So it's the brother-in-law, huh? Get out before I call the police. Don't interfere in my family's business." He took a step forward, eyes filled with the sick confidence of someone used to lording over others. "What do you think you can do to me?" He laughed coldly. "The Price family has money and power. I could crush you like stepping on an ant." His gaze flicked to Brooke, curled up on the floor. "She's my wife. I can do whatever I want with her." Then he turned back to me, smirking. "And you're just a cheap port manager. Don't think being her brother gives you any value." Those words sliced into my ears like knives, but instead of backing down, they only fueled my rage higher. Nolan burst into loud laughter, full of disdain. "Go ahead, touch me again. I swear you'll lose your job, your house, everything. Go back to your rat hole before you regret it." Instinct took over. I lunged forward, fist clenched, body tensed, ready to deliver the punch that would end it all. In that moment, Brooke suddenly struggled to her feet and grabbed my arm with what little strength she had left. "Stop, please stop, David. I beg you, don't hit him." Her voice trembled, almost breaking. "I can't take it anymore. Don't get in trouble because of me." I froze. My fist remained clenched, but my body stayed rooted in place. Nolan saw it and sneered again, stepping closer, deliberately provoking. He smirked. "What's wrong?" "Hit me then, I'm waiting." He leaned in close to my face, whispering tauntingly, "Go on, hit me. Then see what a port manager like you has left after today." I stared straight into his eyes, breathing heavily. "Hitting you would only dirty my hands," I said slowly, my voice turning ice cold. "But I swear if you ever touch my sister again, I won't be standing here talking to you." Nolan threw his head back and laughed loudly, the contemptuous sound echoing in the room. "I thought you were something. Turns out you're scared already? In the end, you're just a coward." I looked down at Brooke, trembling as she clung to my arm. In that instant, I unclenched my fist. Not because I feared Nolan, but because I understood. If I threw that punch now, he would win in the dirtiest way possible. I bent down, wrapping my arms protectively around Brooke. "Let's get out of here," I said softly but firmly. "I'm taking you away from this place." Behind me, Nolan roared in fury. "You might escape today, but you won't escape forever. You'll regret this. I swear it." I didn't look back. I helped Brooke out of that house, letting his curses and contemptuous glare hit my back with only one thought in my mind. My sister had to live, even if it meant facing the entire world. I got Brooke into the car and drove straight to the nearest hospital. On the way, she sobbed uncontrollably. "I called you because he lost it when he saw me texting a friend." I held her hand, comforting her. "Don't say anything more, just rest." At the hospital, the doctor examined her injuries, fortunately not serious, just bruises and scrapes. I sat by her bed, caring for her while blaming myself for not acting sooner. Why had I let her go back? Why hadn't I forced her to stay? The regret stabbed like needles. When she was more lucid, I suggested, "Come live with me and Rachel, Brooke. I'll protect you." But she refused, her voice weak. I don't want to be a burden to you, and I have my child. I can't disrupt your family life." I pleaded with her, but she shook her head. "I need time to think." With no other choice, I quietly arranged a temporary rental apartment for Brooke in the suburbs of San Diego. Discreet enough that Nolan would have trouble finding it. Safe enough for her to breathe without jumping at every sound. I paid several months in advance, changed the locks, checked every corner, and only then brought her there. Standing at the door, I looked at her closely and spoke slowly, as if reminding myself, "Stay here for now. At least you'll be safe here for the time being. As for your child, I'll find a way to get him out of this as soon as possible." Brooke gazed at me for a long time, her eyes red from exhaustion and gratitude. She stepped forward and hugged me tightly, her voice soft. "If it weren't for you, I really don't know what would happen to me and my child. Thank you for not abandoning me." I left in silence, carrying a heavy weight on my chest. I knew this wasn't the end, not even the real beginning. Nolan wouldn't stop so easily. A storm was brewing, and if I wanted to protect my sister and that innocent child, I had to be ready to face whatever was coming. The car sped through the late night, the streetlights of San Diego casting hazy glows through the windshield, creating long streaks of light like scars. I drove slowly, not out of fatigue, but because my mind was reeling from the images I had just witnessed. Brooke lying on the floor, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth, Nolan sneering with arrogance. His curses still echoed in my ears like a challenge. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my hands trembling. How could I let her go back there? But she had chosen the temporary apartment, and I respected that, at least for now. Her child, the little boy she hadn't told me much about, had become the reason for her incredible resilience. I wondered if the boy had witnessed those violent scenes. The thought made my heart ache sharply. When I got home, the living room light was still on. Rachel hadn't gone to sleep. She was always like that, waiting for me no matter how late. I stepped inside, closing the door gently, but Rachel had already sensed something unusual from my footsteps. "David, you're back?" Her voice came from the sofa, laced with worry and relief. I slumped down beside her, my whole body exhausted. Rachel looked at me, her eyes full of concern, not rushing to ask questions. I took a deep breath and recounted everything that had just happened. From Brooke's frantic plea for help, her trembling voice over the phone, to the scene of violence at her house, Nolan cursing and insulting her, her lying on the floor with her shattered phone. I described how I had burst in, shoved him away, and held her protectively. My voice grew heavy with fatigue and pent-up resentment. Each word felt dragged from the depths of my heart. "I almost hit him, Rachel. I nearly lost control. But she was so weak I had to get her out of there." Rachel listened quietly without interrupting once. She simply placed her hand gently on my shoulder, stroking it comfortingly, letting me unload the overwhelming emotions from what I had witnessed. Tears rolled down my face without me realizing. Not crying exactly, but the explosion of suppressed feelings. Rachel hugged me and whispered, "You did the right thing. I know you're blaming yourself, but thanks to you, Brooke is safe right now. You didn't abandon her, and that matters more than anything. I'm here with you. We'll get through this together." We sat like that for a long time in silence, with only the ticking of the clock and the sound of our breathing. I remembered our wedding day, how Rachel had smiled radiantly and promised to stand by me through every storm. Now the real storm had arrived, and she remained as steadfast as ever. When I had calmed down and my breathing steadied, Rachel spoke. Her voice was serious yet gentle. "David, I've seen and heard enough to understand. This is no longer an ordinary marital conflict. This is a dangerous situation that could spiral beyond our control. Nolan isn't just a bad husband. He has an entire family behind him with money and power. If we act impulsively, Brooke will suffer the most." Her words were like a splash of cold water, but necessary. I nodded and listened. Rachel was always the one who thought things through, unlike me, who often let emotions guide me. Then she admitted, I've been thinking of someone ever since you told me about the Price family and how they cover things up. It's Uncle Jonathan Myers, my uncle. He's a former lawyer who for many years specialized in marital cases involving wealthy and powerful families. He worked at major law firms and knows exactly how families like the Prices operate. I was surprised. Jonathan? I had only met him a few times at Rachel's family gatherings. An older man with silver hair, sharp eyes, who loved telling thrilling stories about cases. But now, the idea made sense. Rachel continued. He has experience with similar situations. Domestic violence hidden behind money. He can give us advice. She suggested, you should meet Uncle Jonathan to get guidance and a proper path forward. We can't take risks or make mistakes that could put Brooke in an even worse position. You can't do this alone, David. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. Jonathan was Rachel's relative. If things went wrong, he could be in danger. I don't want to involve him, Rachel. Nolan and his family, they're ruthless. I shook my head, imagining him being threatened. But Rachel reasoned persuasively. That's exactly why we need an expert. Uncle Jonathan knows how to handle this. It's not his first time. Staying silent or hesitating now means letting Brooke continue facing danger. You saved her today, but what about tomorrow? Nolan will find the temporary apartment. He'll use money to track her. We need a plan, not impulsive actions. Her words struck me. I thought for a long time, staring out the window into the enveloping darkness. The image of Brooke trembling, her child waiting at the grandparents' house, all of it made me realize Rachel was right. I wasn't enough on my own. Finally, I set aside my hesitation. Okay, I'll call him. I took out my phone and dialed the number Rachel gave me for Jonathan. It rang a few times before his voice came through, warm and alert despite the late hour. What's going on that you're calling so late? I briefly explained the situation. About Brooke, Nolan, the violence, and the threats. He listened without interrupting, then said, Sounds serious. Meet me tomorrow at our usual cafe, the one on the corner near your place. I arranged to meet him in person, feeling a partial sense of relief. Rachel smiled. I'm glad you did the right thing. That night I slept fitfully, dreaming of Nolan's sneer, but this time Jonathan was standing beside me. The next morning I woke early, checked messages from Brooke. She reported she was safe, but the tone still felt forced. I drove to the quiet cafe in the suburbs, where the trees were lush and the air fresh. Jonathan was already there, a steaming cup of coffee in front of him, his glasses glinting in the morning sun. He greeted me with a firm handshake. Sit down. Tell me the whole story in detail. The meeting unfolded in a serious atmosphere as I recounted everything. From the initial abuses Brooke had described, the threats of losing custody, to the Price family's cover-ups, how they used money to bribe in Nolan's ex-girlfriend's case. I described the night she knocked on my door, the rescue yesterday afternoon, my voice trembling as I recalled her lying on the floor. Jonathan sat in deep thought for a long time, not rushing to judgment. He sipped his coffee, gazing into the distance as if organizing everything in his mind. Then he concluded, his voice low. It's quite clear, David. This is classic domestic violence, but shrouded in power. Emotions and anger alone aren't enough to confront a powerful family like the Prices. They have their own lawyers, connections to the courts, even the media. If you charge in unprepared, they'll crush you and Brooke. His words cut sharply, but they were honest. I nodded, my heart racing. So what do we do, Uncle? He emphasized, you need solid legal evidence. Medical records, witnesses, documentation of infidelity, everything must be airtight, undeniable. No one can single-handedly fight a system accustomed to distorting truth with money and connections. I've seen many cases. Victims accused then get painted as gold diggers or mentally unstable. I pictured that scenario. Brooke's fear became clearer than ever. Jonathan continued, but the most viable path isn't just legal. The law is slow, and with money they can drag out a case until the victim is exhausted. You need the power of media and public opinion. When the truth is presented properly, it can create counter-pressure. Get the story to the press, social media, let society judge. The Price family fears losing their reputation more than the courts. Hearing that, I felt as if I had awakened. For the first time, I saw a clear path through the maze of power. Until now, I had only thought of lawsuits, but the media? The idea made my heart pound with excitement, like stepping into a major battle. You're right, but how do we start? Jonathan smiled for the first time. We'll make a plan. First, gather evidence quietly. I'll guide you. Don't rush, but move quickly before Nolan acts. We sat there, and together with Jonathan, we began crafting a calculated plan to gradually bring the matter into the light. The cafe grew quieter as customers trickled out, leaving only our whispered conversation mingling with the rich aroma of coffee. Jonathan spread out paper and pen on the table, sketching a simple diagram, a network of steps from gathering evidence to launching a media campaign. He emphasized, "Silence is the key, David. Don't let the Price family suspect anything. They have eyes and ears everywhere. Lawyers, private investigators. One wrong move and they'll strike back before you can even catch your breath." I nodded, my heart pounding. The thought of Nolan plotting revenge against me sent a chill down my spine. But this time, I wasn't alone. Jonathan was my anchor, with decades of experience facing down powerful families. He briefly recounted an old case. I once handled something similar. A wealthy husband beating his wife and covering it up with money. We won through evidence and public pressure. I believe you can do it too. We parted with a promise to stay in daily contact. On the drive home, I called Brooke at her temporary apartment. Her voice was still trembling. "David, I'm scared he'll find me here." I reassured her. "I have a plan now, but you need to stay strong. Tomorrow I'll come pick you up to go to the hospital." She hesitated but agreed. That night I lay awake, imagining every worst-case scenario. Nolan breaking into the apartment or hiring someone to follow us. The tension felt like a string about to snap, but Jonathan's guidance kept me grounded. The next morning, following Jonathan's directions, I began executing the plan discreetly, avoiding any impulsive actions that might alert the Price family. I drove to Brooke's apartment, parked in a hidden corner, and scanned the surroundings before knocking. She opened the door, looking exhausted but more resolute. We went together to the hospital, not the nearest one, but the older facility where she had been treated before. On the way, Brooke shared more about past visits, her voice soft and weary. "I used to come here alone, always lying that I'd fallen off a bike or bumped into something. The doctors suspected, but I was scared. I didn't dare speak up." I gently squeezed her hand, eyes fixed on the road, and said slowly, "That ends now. We won't hide anything anymore. These records will speak the truth." The first task was to accompany Brooke to the hospital and request copies of her medical records documenting the times. She had sought treatment for unusual injuries during her marriage. We sat in the waiting room, my heart racing. The administrative staff eyed us curiously. "We need a reason for the release." I stayed calm as Jonathan had instructed, for personal purposes in accordance with medical privacy laws. They agreed after verifying Brooke's identification. The medical reports were printed out, page by page, bruises on the neck, dislocated shoulder, soft tissue injuries to the abdomen. The dates matched the incidents she had described. I held them with trembling hands. "This will be undeniable evidence." She looked at them, tears streaming down. "I'm terrified to see these again. Every page reminds me of the times I pretended nothing had happened. But you're right. If I want this to end, I have to face it. I can't keep running forever." Those records became objective, official evidence from the hospital, not just words. At the same time, I hired a private investigator as recommended by Jonathan, a discreet older man who had once worked for the police. We met in a quiet diner and I asked him to track and gather documentation on Nolan's extramarital affair. I want you to follow his meetings, take photos, but keep it completely covert. Don't let him suspect anything." The investigator nodded. "I'll do as you ask, but the cost will be a bit high. Make sure you're prepared." In the days that followed, I waited anxiously, checking an anonymous email account daily. The first report arrived. Nolan meeting his mistress at an upscale cafe, kissing openly. Then schedules, hotels, restaurants, even weekend getaways. The reports showed the affair wasn't fleeting. It had lasted at least 2 years, carried out brazenly while Brooke endured abuse. The photos were clear. Nolan laughing and flirting with the woman while my sister suffered at home with injuries. I read them, blood boiling. "You bastard, you dared to be this blatant?" But I held back, copied the reports and stored them securely. I also tracked down Nolan's ex-girlfriend, the one who had silently left him years earlier. Jonathan had given me her address. She now lived in Los Angeles, working a regular office job. I drove there, heart pounding. When the door opened, a woman in her mid-30s stood before me, eyes wary. "Who are you looking for?" she asked cautiously. I introduced myself and briefly explained Brooke's situation. She shook her head immediately. "I don't want to remember that. The Price family. They terrified me. They threatened me, used money to force me to stay silent." I didn't push, only speaking slowly about how my sister was in the exact same position she had once been in, and that if no one spoke up, Nolan would continue harming others. Before leaving, I left a note with my phone number, saying I'd always be ready to listen if she changed her mind. She closed the door in silence. I left without much hope. A few days later, an unknown number appeared on my phone. When I answered, her voice came through low. "I've thought it over. If you still want the truth, meet me at a cafe." Sitting across from each other, after hearing more details about Brooke's current situation and realizing my determination to take this to court, she fell silent for a long time before nodding. She agreed to provide a detailed statement about the times Nolan had assaulted her, out of jealousy during arguments, and how his parents used lawyers and money to threaten her job if she didn't stay quiet. "In the end, I gave up and disappeared," she said. The statement was recorded and fully signed, an essential final piece falling into place. Before parting, I grasped her hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you. You've saved my sister." Through the investigation, the detective also uncovered a shady network of connections Nolan's parents had used to bury the previous abuse case, silencing everything. The report was chillingly detailed. A prominent lawyer paid a large sum to handle the fallout, a retired police officer who intervened to erase records. Names, dates, every link meticulously documented. I read it, spine tingling, muttering, "They have a network this extensive?" I called Jonathan. He confirmed, "Just as I suspected. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a systematic pattern of violence protected at every level." I carefully compiled all the evidence, backing it up in multiple places, USB drives, cloud storage, even giving one copy to Rachel. I organized it clearly, medical records in one folder, affair photos in another, witness statements separately. To avoid sabotage or tampering, I used complex passwords and didn't store anything on my work computer. Every night I double-checked, paranoid about hacking. If Nolan finds out, everything collapses. That thought kept me awake. I handed the full dossier to Jonathan for review, editing, and legal assessment. We met at his office, a discreet place with no sign. He examined it closely, making notes. Medical records are solid, hospital stamped. Affair photos, good but need timestamps verified. Witness statement, powerful but must be notarized. He refined it. Add exact dates, avoid speculation. I learned as we went, feeling like we were building a tower. Each brick had to be secure. Finally, after weeks of quiet work, I reassured Brooke that from this point on she wouldn't face this alone, and this fight was no longer her solitary fear. We met at the apartment. She held her child, the innocent little boy who knew nothing. "I have enough evidence now. Jonathan says we're ready. You're not alone anymore. Me, Rachel, Jonathan, even his ex-girlfriend. We'll win." She cried, but this time tears of hope. "Thank you for helping me." I hugged her. "We'll get through this together." The tension remained. Nolan had called her a few times with threats, but now we had weapons. The battle was about to begin, and my heart pounded with anticipation, like waiting for the first thunderclap. In the days that followed, I lived in a state of constant alertness, like a soldier awaiting the order to attack. Jonathan called daily, his voice calm but urgent. "David, the evidence is solid now. It's time to bring it into the light, but we have to be smart. Don't release everything at once. Let them dig their own grave." I agreed, gripping the copied dossier tightly. The idea of using the media as a weapon kept me awake at night with excitement. Until now, I had just been a port manager, accustomed to containers and ship schedules, not political games or public opinion. But this was the only way to breach the wall of power built by the Price family. I imagined Nolan reading the news, his face turning pale. That thought filled me with a mix of exhilaration and fear. If we made a mistake, they would crush us. Following the plan, I began feeding the evidence to the media cautiously. Not by dropping sensational bombs on social media, but by connecting, through Jonathan, with reputable investigative journalists who specialized in social issues and had independent sources. I didn't release everything at once. Instead, the truth emerged piece by piece, thoroughly verified, avoiding any impression of personal vendetta or cheap sensationalism. First, I sent Brooks' medical records to a reporter at the San Diego Union Tribune, along with an anonymous statement from Nolan's ex-girlfriend. Jonathan had instructed, "Stick to facts only, no emotion. Let the public draw their own conclusions." I sat at my computer, sending the anonymous email, my heart pounding as if I were committing a crime. A few days later, the first articles began appearing on investigative online sites, then gradually spreading to print. They focused on the medical records and signs of repeated abuse, corroborated by independent sources like unrelated doctors and medical experts. The tone was dry and objective, stating only the facts. Medical records from a local hospital show an unnamed woman repeatedly admitted with unusual injuries, including bruising on the neck and a dislocated shoulder over the course of 2 years. Independent experts confirm these are typical signs of domestic violence. No mention of Nolan, no reference to Brooke, no emotion or speculation, just raw data. I read the first article on my phone, my hands trembling slightly. "It started," I whispered to Rachel. She hugged me and said softly, "You did the right thing. But be careful." A surge of excitement rose. Had Nolan seen it yet? And if so, how would he react? The media didn't stop there. As Jonathan had predicted, they dug deeper, cross-referencing information, and raising questions about Nolan Price's extramarital affair during the marriage. One local news site reported, "Anonymous sources have provided evidence of a prolonged extramarital relationship coinciding with the documented injuries." They didn't name names, but hinted at a wealthy local businessman. Then they questioned how his family had handled similar crises in the past, referencing the ex-girlfriend's case with details about lawyers and shady connections uncovered by the investigator. I followed each article, my heart beating faster with every new headline. "They're taking the bait, exactly as we hoped," Jonathan called, his voice excited. "Now let public opinion do the rest." But I worried. One night, Brooke called in tears. "A reporter contacted me. I'm scared Nolan will find out." I reassured her, "Don't respond yet, just let me handle it." This is part of the plan. Online communities began speaking out, like an undercurrent building into a storm. The articles were shared on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, especially local forums in San Diego and La Jolla. People expressed outrage at hidden abuse. "Another rich guy who thinks he's above the law. Stop domestic violence." Comments like that spread quickly with hundreds of shares. But there were also skeptics questioning the truth. Who knows? It might be fabricated for extortion. Reading them left me conflicted, glad the story was gaining attention, yet afraid misinformation could ruin everything. The case had transcended one family's private matter and become a hot topic on social media. I stayed up late monitoring screens, refreshing constantly. My heart racing each time likes surged. "What if Nolan sees it?" Rachel asked. "He will," I replied firmly, though unease gnawed inside me. Then came a turning point. Women's advocacy organizations got involved. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, a 24/7 national service offering free confidential support, publicly expressed concern on their website and social media. They posted, "We are monitoring reports of concealed domestic violence in San Diego. If you are a victim, call our hotline or text us for crisis intervention, counseling, and service referrals." They proactively reached out to Brooke via an anonymous email forwarded by Jonathan, offering legal and psychological support, plus safe shelter if needed. Brooke told me, "They called me David. They said I'm not alone and have experts to help prepare my statement." I was thrilled but nervous. Could Nolan be monitoring? Similarly, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, NCADV, the leading grassroots organization against domestic violence, with a mission to lead and mobilize society for change and zero tolerance, spoke out. They posted on their official page, "Recent reports of power-shielded domestic violence in California highlight the need for policy change. NCADV is committed to supporting victims and survivors with educational resources, legal advocacy, and community support." They contacted Brooke directly, sending materials on victim rights and connecting her to local support groups. "They said I have rights to my child," Brooke whispered over the phone, her voice mixing hope and fear. I clutched the phone. "See? We have allies now." But deep down I worried. This attention might drive Nolan mad. The media continued tracing the Price family's social connections, questioning their use of money and influence to cover past violence. A deep investigative piece in the Los Angeles Times, facilitated by Jonathan's connections, exposed the Price family, owners of a major real estate company in La Jolla, has been linked to similar incidents with allegations of using connections to erase records. They interviewed anonymous sources hinting at involved lawyers and police. The family's polished image, glamorous social media photos, parties with the elite, began cracking visibly. Online comments, "Wealthy but immoral." Reading them made my heart pound. This was a critical blow. But Nolan called Brooke. "You think you can touch me? I'll destroy you." She recounted it, voice shaking. "David, I'm scared." I rushed to her apartment and held her. "He's panicking. That's a good sign." The impact spread to the family's company. Articles raised questions about leadership ethics, internal crisis handling, and reputational risks to partners, investors, and high-end clients. A local Forbes piece. Could a domestic violence scandal affect Price Enterprises' reputation? It quoted experts. Today's clients are sensitive to social ethics. Domestic violence is a major issue. I monitored developments around their business. Though not publicly traded, rumors trickled out. Some partners posted cautious statements about temporarily reviewing collaborations and ethical standards. Others publicly announced project delays, citing reputational risk assessments. On industry forums, people discussed a fund quietly withdrawing and professional associations reconsidering ties, unwilling to be linked to any domestic violence scandal. I pictured Nolan's parents in emergency meetings, faces pale as their familiar protective circle cracked. The excitement tightened my chest. We were gaining the upper hand, but the big question lingered. When would they strike back? I understood the media wasn't the end goal, just a tool to create pressure and dismantle the long-standing shield. Sitting with Jonathan at our usual cafe, he said, "Public opinion is the strongest weapon against power. They fear losing face more than money." I nodded. "But I'm worried about Brooke. He might do something crazy to her." He patted my shoulder. "That's the risk, but now the truth is out. He can't hide it anymore." I also realized the fight was far from over, still full of risks, lawsuits, threats, even physical danger. But at least now the truth was no longer buried in silence. I looked out the window at the San Diego sunshine, like a ray of hope. Brooke called. "David, I got a letter from the organization. They're helping me prepare for divorce." I smiled. "That's great. You'll soon have your child back." But my heart still raced. The first thunder had sounded and the storm was coming. The weeks that followed passed in a state of tense anticipation, like walking a tightrope between two towering skyscrapers. I went to work at the port, appearing normal on the outside, but my mind was constantly swirling with the latest news. Every morning I opened my phone to check for articles, my heart pounding whenever I saw headlines about the domestic violence scandal in La Jolla. Jonathan called frequently, his voice as calm as a seasoned general. "David, public opinion is boiling over. The organizations are getting involved. That's a good sign. But don't let your guard down. They will counterattack." I knew he was right. The Price family wasn't the type to sit idly by. They had money, connections, and now their reputation was shaking. I pictured Nolan in his luxurious mansion, face flushed with rage, urgently summoning lawyers. That image unsettled me, but it also fueled my determination. We had come too far to stop now. When conditions were ripe, solid evidence, supportive public opinion, and Brooke gradually regaining her mental strength, Jonathan and I compiled the complete dossier. We sat in his office, files spread across the table, medical records showing extensive bruising, clear photos of the affair, the ex-girlfriend's statement, and proof of the Price family's cover-up network. Jonathan gave it one final review, his eyes sharp. "Perfect. Now it's time to file the official lawsuit. This is the turning point, from covert to overt." I took a deep breath, signed the documents, my heart pounding like a drum. Filing at the San Diego courthouse felt like challenging an entire empire. The information was indirectly passed to the media through Jonathan, and the case officially entered the phase of open confrontation. Initial developments went in our favor. The court accepted the lawsuit quickly. The preliminary judge reviewed the evidence and set a trial date. The medical records and statements were admitted as foundational evidence, not dismissed outright as Jonathan had feared. The media continued covering it cautiously but seriously. Not sensationalist, but in depth. One article in the Union Tribune read, "Domestic violence lawsuit involving the Price family. Initial evidence suggests repeated patterns." They interviewed an expert from NCADV, emphasizing the importance of protecting victims. Reading it brought me some relief, but the tension remained. Realizing the situation was slipping out of control, the Price family launched a fierce counteroffensive, shifting from silence to actively shaping public narrative. They no longer sat still, like a cornered beast, they struck back. I remember that day clearly. Early in the morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with Google alerts. They held an emergency press conference at their company headquarters in La Jolla, with Nolan standing center stage, impeccably suited, face icy cold. On TV, he spoke in a steady but arrogant tone. "This is merely a family conflict exaggerated by those seeking to exploit it. We categorically deny all allegations. The Price family has always respected the law and ethics." They reassured shareholders, partners, and clients, promising transparency and cooperation with the court. His father, the real estate tycoon, added, "We will prove our innocence, and those spreading false rumors will be held accountable." At the same time, they released articles and statements accusing Brooke in return, implying personal motives and threatening countersuits for defamation. Posts on social media and friendly outlets, undoubtedly paid for, spread rapidly. One article on a local news site, "Victim or gold digger? Violence allegations may be a ploy for assets." They suggested Brooke was mentally unstable, greedy for wealth from a rich marriage, and even accused her of infidelity first. No evidence, just insinuations, but enough to sow doubt. Public opinion began splitting. Some comments read, "She might be right. Rich people often get exploited." Reading them cut my heart like a knife. Jonathan called, "Don't panic, David. This is a standard tactic. We have real evidence. They're just talking." While I was dealing with the media front, responding to interviews indirectly through Jonathan and monitoring public sentiment, I received a panicked call from Brooke. The phone rang in the middle of the night. Her voice broke. "David, he found me here." My heart stopped. I bolted upright. "Lock the door right now. I'm coming." She sobbed. "He's pounding on the door, shouting, 'Come save me quick.'" I leaped out of bed, threw on a jacket, and raced through the dark night. On the way, she explained over speakerphone. Nolan had tracked her to the temporary apartment, surely through surveillance or hired investigators. He directly threatened that if Brooke dared testify in court, the consequences wouldn't stop with her. Her entire family would face serious trouble. He said he'd get you fired, cause accidents for Mom and Dad, and make sure I never see my child again. Her voice shook as if reliving hell. I arrived to find Nolan gone, but Brooke completely collapsed, curled up on the floor, face ashen. I held her, but she was terrified, repeatedly begging, "Help me, David. I can't take it anymore. Please stop all this." I had calmed her bit by bit over the phone earlier and now in person, but helplessness overwhelmed me. "Calm down, I'm here. He can't do anything to you." But my words sounded weak. She cried, "He knows everything. He said he'll destroy us all." I called Jonathan immediately. "They're threatening her directly. What now?" He stayed calm. "Record it if it happens again. This is additional evidence for court." But my heart raced. What if he followed through? At the same time, my parents called, my father's voice trembling. "David, stop this. They've been making anonymous threatening calls to us all night." My mother sobbed. "Please, Brooke should just stay quiet. It'll all end." The mounting pressure convinced my parents that continuing the lawsuit would only endanger the family, and Brooke should remain silent so everything would soon blow over. Hearing it tore my heart apart. My parents, once my rock, now begging me to surrender. "Mom, Dad, I can't. She'll die if I stop." My father reproached. "You're dragging the whole family into hell. Think of us." The call ended in tears. I sat alone, mind in chaos. How had everything turned upside down like this? The media began wavering. Some articles adopted a more cautious tone, questioning motives and the allegations' authenticity. One online piece: "Violence allegations, truth, or asset grab tactic?" They quoted sources close to the Price family, suggesting Brooke had psychological issues. Public opinion split further. Support Price emerged, clashing with justice for Brooke. I faced the risk of losing momentum, realizing that if Brooke wasn't strong enough to testify, the entire plan could collapse with one misstep. I met her at the apartment. She trembled. "I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared of losing my child." I held her. "You have to be strong. We have evidence, public support. Don't let him win through fear." But inside, I was uneasy. The storm had arrived, and we were right in its eye. The days leading up to the trial dragged on like a prolonged nightmare, slow, relentless, and haunting. I stayed up all night, sitting in front of my computer, monitoring every social media comment and every new article that appeared. The Price family counterattacked ruthlessly, using money to sway public opinion and spreading slander about Brooke. My sister, once so strong, now huddled in her temporary apartment, her eyes ringed with dark circles from countless sleepless nights. I called her constantly, patiently reassuring her bit by bit. "The organizations are supporting you now. You have the right to speak out, and the court will protect you." But through the video call screen, she only shook her head, her voice trembling. "David, he keeps calling me. He says if I testify in court, I'll lose custody of my child, and our whole family will be destroyed." Those words cut straight into my heart. I blamed myself. Was I dragging her into a war that was too brutal? But I also knew that stopping now would be no different from surrendering, allowing Nolan to continue tormenting her in silence. Jonathan tried to keep me steady. "David, this is the decisive moment. The trial will be the final battle. Prepare Brooke mentally." We held an urgent meeting at our usual cafe, where he outlined tactics. "They'll delay and attack the evidence, but ours is solid. Medical records, affair photos, witness statements. As long as Brooke testifies in person, they can't break it. I nodded, but anxiety surged. Rachel stayed home, brewing coffee for me every morning and hugging me as she whispered, "I'll help Brooke. She needs a woman by her side." I didn't know then what Rachel had been doing quietly. I just thought she was comforting her. The tension built like the air before a thunderstorm. Every phone ring made my heart tighten. The day of the trial finally arrived like a ticking time bomb exploding. The case had drawn massive media and public attention. The courtroom in the San Diego courthouse was packed from early on, reporters crowding outside the doors, microphones and cameras flashing. I entered with Jonathan clutching a heavy briefcase of files, but felt lighter seeing Brooke. She arrived with Rachel, face pale but eyes resolute. The atmosphere was tense from the very first minutes. The judge banged the gavel, the room fell silent, broken only by whispers from the gallery. On the other side, Nolan sat ramrod straight in a sharp black suit flanked by a formidable team of lawyers, 4 of them faces impassive with thick stacks of files. His parents sat behind him, their contemptuous gazes sweeping over us. I sat beside Brooke, holding her hand under the table. "I believe you can do this." She nodded weakly, but her hand was ice cold. The trial began with opening statements. Jonathan presented clearly. "Your Honor, this is a case of repeated domestic violence shrouded in power. We have medical evidence, witnesses, and a history of behavior." He submitted the files and projected slides showing Brooke's bruises and Nolan's affair photos. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. But the Price family's powerful legal team immediately dominated. Their lead attorney, a tall man with a booming voice, stood to rebut. "Your Honor, these are baseless accusations from a failed marriage. There is no direct evidence, only speculation and rumors. They relentlessly targeted imperfections in our files. A vague date in the investigator's report, a statement not fully notarized. This is a smear campaign aimed at asset seizure," the lawyer shouted, pointing at us. Both sides hurled accusations and counter-arguments non-stop like an endless boxing match. Faced with their sharp arguments and delay tactics, requests for adjournments to verify more, objections to minor evidence, the momentum gradually shifted toward the Prices. They called independent witnesses, a doctor who had treated Brooke, apparently bribed to claim the injuries were from accidents she had reported at the time. The courtroom buzzed, the judge nodded thoughtfully. I felt more helpless than ever, gripping the armrest, cold sweat pouring down. "Jonathan, we're losing," I whispered. He shook his head. "Not yet. Wait for Brooke's testimony. That's our trump card." But my fear became reality when I learned Brooke, overwhelmed by terror and mental exhaustion, had refused to testify. The trial recessed in a heavy atmosphere. The judge declared a 30-minute break for review. I realized that without Brooke's direct testimony, all the evidence we had painstakingly gathered could be twisted in any direction. Medical records, investigative reports, indirect witness statements. They all held value, but without Brooke speaking in her own voice, they would remain cold and easily doubted. In that moment, I clearly understood the fragility of justice when facing money and power. And helplessness washed over me as I realized our efforts could collapse simply because of a very human fear. Just when everything seemed irredeemable, the door to the waiting room opened. Brooke appeared at the courtroom entrance, walking beside Rachel. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of fear and hope. Brooke stepped forward slowly, her hands clenched as if holding herself upright, while Rachel stayed close, silent but steadfast. In that instant, I knew she had overcome the greatest fear of her life. No words were needed. Just Brooke's gaze fixed straight ahead said she was ready to stand up. Not for revenge, but to speak the truth she had once been forced to swallow in silence. Only then did I understand. Throughout this time, Rachel had been quietly by Brooke's side. She had accompanied her closely, provided psychological counseling, helped her face her fears step by step, and prepared her mentally for this most difficult moment. It wasn't until much later that I learned my wife, that quiet woman, had called support organizations, contacted the hotline, arranged private therapy sessions, and sat for hours listening to Brooke cry, reminding her of her child and the future ahead. Rachel leaned close and whispered to me. She needed someone who understood a woman's pain, and I was the right person. I hugged my wife and said softly, "Thank you for always being there, encouraging my sister." Brooke walked with Rachel into the courtroom, her steps still trembling, but her eyes changed, determined. The trial resumed and Brooke was called to the witness stand. Though still hesitant and shaking, her voice breaking at times, she finally stood and accused Nolan of all his abuse, threats, and control. "He beat me because I discovered his affair. He threatened to take my child if I reported him. He controlled everything, money, friends." Her honest words, mixed with tears and ragged breaths, silenced the entire courtroom. No drama, no exaggeration, just the truth from the heart of a wounded woman. Nolan sat there, face ashen. His lawyers whispered but fell silent. The public murmured. Reporters scribbled frantically. The direct testimony brought the entire chain of evidence to life. Medical records matching the dates she described, investigative documents on the affair, statements from the ex-girlfriend and investigator. The judge leaned forward to review, the courtroom holding its breath. After careful consideration, the court ruled that Nolan Price was guilty of domestic violence. The judge's voice rang clear. Based on the evidence and testimony, the court finds the defendant guilty. A restraining order is issued against contact with the victim and child. The defendant must attend mandatory behavior control programs, and visitation rights are restricted until a full psychological evaluation. The courtroom erupted, applause from the public, reporters rushing out to make calls. The tide had completely turned. We had officially won the case. The Price family could no longer deny or manipulate the truth. Nolan bowed his head. His parents' faces turned gray. The lawyers shook their heads. I stood, hugging Brooke and Rachel, tears streaming. "We won!" she cried. "I can't believe this. Without you, without Rachel, I could never have done this." Jonathan patted my shoulder. In the end, justice stood with us. In the time that followed, Brooke filed for divorce. The proceedings moved faster than I expected, as if the law had finally chosen to stand with the truth. When the court officially approved it and granted her custody of the child, I saw Brooke's shoulders sag slightly. Not from exhaustion, but from finally setting down a burden carried far too long. The path she had walked was full of pain, but necessary, so she could step out of the darkness and start anew. Watching mother and child leave the courtroom in the afternoon sunlight, I understood that true victory lay not in the verdict, but in her reclaiming her life. The first days after the trial were still tense, like the lingering echoes of a massive storm that hadn't fully dissipated. I sat at home watching the news on TV, my heart still racing whenever Nolan's name or the Price family appeared. Once the truth was fully exposed, the media and women's and children's advocacy organizations unanimously stood on the side of the victim. They didn't just report the news, they continued supporting Brooke after the verdict, affirming that money and power cannot stand above justice. I clearly remember the first post-trial article in the San Diego Union Tribune. Historic verdict, domestic violence victim prevails against powerful Price family. They interviewed a representative from the National Domestic Violence Hotline, who emphasized, "This proves the system can protect victims no matter how powerful the opponent." Brooke received dozens of emails and calls from organizations, local and national alike. One afternoon she called me, her voice a mix of surprise and gratitude. They sent me books on psychological recovery and even introduced me to support groups for single mothers. I no longer feel alone. I smiled over the phone. "You deserve it. They see how brave you are." But deep down, I still worried. Would Nolan find a way to retaliate? I checked the doors at her place daily and installed additional security cameras, my heart pounding whenever I thought about the possibility of him returning. Fortunately, the court-issued restraining order worked effectively, and organizations like the Hotline provided monitoring services ready to intervene at any sign of threat. They assured her, "You no longer have to fight alone." Those words were like medicine, helping Brooke gradually regain her trust. Meanwhile, the Price family was no longer relentlessly attacked in the media. Public attention gradually shifted to other cases, but their honor and social reputation had suffered clear damage. They limited public appearances with no more glamorous parties or boastful social media posts about their luxurious life. Social connections grew more cautious. Old friends avoided them, and associates kept their distance. Once I accidentally read an online comment. The Price family used to be an icon. Now who would dare get close? I didn't gloat. I only felt it was fair. They had used power to cover up for too long and now had to pay the price. Nolan, per court order, had to attend mandatory behavior control programs, and his visitation rights with the child were strictly limited. The family's company, Price Enterprises, specializing in high-end real estate, faced simmering skepticism from partners and clients. It didn't collapse immediately, but like a crack slowly spreading across a solid wall. Jonathan updated me. Shareholders held emergency meetings. Some investment funds are gradually pulling out. They've had to rebrand, hiring a new PR firm and issuing internal statements on ethical commitments. Business articles analyzed. Domestic violence scandal impacts brand. High-end clients don't want association with negative imagery. I followed rumors about their stock. Though not publicly traded, delayed contracts spread word. A major partner in Los Angeles publicly stated, "We are reviewing our relationship due to reputational risk concerns." They had to hold internal workshops and train employees on violence prevention as a belated damage control measure. I thought back to the early days when Nolan sneered at me. "Money is enough to crush you." And now, the money was still there, but the reputation was lost, and that was the most painful blow. Brooke officially began her new life with her child, moving to a quieter environment in the suburbs of Santee, close to our parents but far enough to leave La Jolla memories behind. We helped her move into a small bungalow with a flower garden and a playground for the child. On moving day, she stood at the door, taking a deep breath of fresh air. "David, I no longer hear knocking in the middle of the night." My nephew, the little boy now 4 years old, ran around the yard laughing carefree. "Mommy, our new house is so beautiful." Watching them warmed my heart, though I still felt anxious. Would she be okay? No longer living in fear and anticipation of violence, she gradually learned to breathe steadily and sleep deeply. Organizations like NCADV sent materials and helped her find a job, a light office position suitable for a single mother. I regularly took my sister to psychological therapy, session by session. I scheduled fixed appointments every Wednesday, driving her to the center recommended by the hotline. The therapist, a gentle middle-aged woman, helped her name her fears, untangle guilt, and regain control of her life. At first, she was silent, only crying, but gradually she spoke. "I used to think it was my fault for choosing him." The therapist shook her head. "No, you're not at fault. You were a victim, and now you're a survivor." I waited outside, my heart racing each time she emerged with red eyes. But over time, Brooke grew more stable. She slept deeper, no longer startled awake at night, talked more, sharing future plans, and began believing she wasn't wrong for standing up to protect herself and her child. One session, she truly smiled. "David, today I talked about my son and I realized how strong I am." I hugged her. "I always knew. You've always been." One day on the way home from therapy, I saw our parents waiting in front of Brooke's new house. They had come on their own initiative, faces heavy and no longer avoiding us. My father's hair was grayer, his eyes red. My mother, Janet, held a bouquet, hands trembling. "David, Brooke, we're here to talk to you," my father said, voice choked. I stopped the car, heart pounding. After months of anger, what were they here for? Brooke stepped out, face paling at the sight of them. We went inside and sat around the kitchen table, the atmosphere heavy like the day I first told them the story. Our parents admitted that their silence and cowardice throughout had become a burden of regret and shame. My father bowed his head for a long time before speaking, voice hoarse. We chose safety for ourselves over protecting our daughter. I convinced myself endurance was wise, but now I know it was just cowardice. Every day I live with the feeling I betrayed my own child. My mother couldn't hold back tears, hands trembling as she grasped Brooks. I heard you suffering in silence and still turned away. I was so scared I forgot I was a mother. There were nights I lay awake thinking what might have happened if you hadn't escaped to your brother's house that night. I regret not standing in front of you even once. They offered no excuses, no blame on circumstances or others' power, just raw admission and belated remorse. Brooke and I couldn't forgive immediately. The wounds weren't healed, but we didn't turn away either. We chose to listen, giving them a chance to make amends through actions. I spoke directly, not angrily, but firmly. Mom, Dad, apologies are easy to say. What we need is for you to stand for justice even when it's not safe. They nodded, eyes no longer evasive. We understand. And this time, no matter the cost, we won't stay silent. At a family gathering, my father stood, voice low but resolute. When we learned our daughter was abused, we chose silence. That was the biggest mistake of our lives. From today, I promise it won't happen again. The room fell silent for a few seconds, then everyone nodded in support. Another time, my mother hugged Brooke tightly, voice breaking. I'm sorry, honey, for arriving too late. Brooke cried in her arms, whispering, I forgive you, but I need time. Those words weren't loud or dramatic, but enough for me to sense real change. The initial wariness and doubt gradually gave way to something else. Hope. My family, after everything, was learning to stand together again. That Christmas, the family gathered for the first time in true peace. Brooke's house was cozy with a sparkling tree, gifts underneath, and children's laughter echoing. No more fear, no more secrets to hide. We left all the pain behind. We sat around the table, ate dinner, and shared happy stories. Looking around, my heart warmed. From hell to heaven, all because of courage. Reflecting on everything that happened, I realized one thing. Justice doesn't come to those who remain silent. Only when truth is spoken and defended to the end, do money and power have to yield. Sitting alone on the San Diego beach, waves lapping gently, I thought about the journey. From the night knocking to the trial, from fear to victory. From my sister's story, I drew a bitter lesson. Silence in the face of violence isn't preserving the family, it's allowing evil to persist and pass from one person to another. I remembered how our parents once advised endurance, and now they regretted it. And if I have one piece of advice for anyone in a similar situation, don't suffer alone. Find those who will stand with you, because standing up isn't destroying the family, it's saving yourself and those you love. I share this story with friends and colleagues at the port, hoping to help someone. Brooke now smiles more. Her child is growing up. We still meet, but now it's with joy. Life goes on, but the lesson remains etched deep. The old anxiety has turned to peace, and I know we have